So Donald Stojack talks to Chris Haase today. Oh gosh, did I say that correct, Chris? Nothing, right? And I'm gonna let him kind of take the controls. Part of the problem sometimes in our businesses is we don't have clarity. And Chris is a master at this process and does this for some pretty impressive people. But his craft is really helping top tier professionals get their brand identities. And that's like a big subjective subject. But I know Chris has helped a number of people in this group as well. So let's hand it over to Chris and let's just pick his brain on this today. Chris, you're on mute.
Can you share the host controls and I will share my slides?
Yeah, absolutely. There you go.
Okay, so let me do the screen sharing thing here. And we'll dive into all the good stuff around brand. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So great to connect with all of you. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. So my name again is Chris Haase, and we're going to talk today about brand. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've picked up over the years around this and how it can help what you're doing in terms of the coaching process and working with your own businesses. So by way of introduction, I'll start off by kind of walking through where I come from in my own background. So I come out of the high-tech space, worked at Intuit, worked at Apple, co-founded my own startup, and I had a bunch of different functional roles within that. Wasn't sure how that all made sense, but then I got into coaching at Lee Hecht Harrison, which works with folks that have been laid off from organizations. And so began to see how all my prior experience played together and helped them move to the next phase of where they were going to go. And while I was there, I also, I ran one of the executive job search work teams for 3 years and helped folks make these jumps. And that led me to create my own firm, which is Clarity Silicon Valley. And so what I focus on now is I guide senior and mid-level leaders in advancing to the next role of their career by helping them do two things. One, optimize their role performance, but two is harnessing the power of their brand. And that's what we're going to be spending our time today is on that second part on the brand piece. So I want to share with you just to start off kind of how I see the brand landscape to give you guys some context around that, just to kind of help you with that. So when I tell people I do brand, people go, oh, branding. And in my world, those are very different things. And so, branding is one part of it, and that's kind of one side. The next level down, if you were to click down, is brand. And then after that, you move into identity. So let's kind of unpack each of these. So branding, in my experience, is the repetition of the reinforcement of your brand. Branding presumes you know what your brand is. If you don't know what your brand is, well, what are you branding is my question. So, and that can take the form of, speaking, social media posts, podcasts, or networking. All right, this talk right now can be is a form of branding because I'm getting my word out about what I do. And then brand is really, I would say, it's your distilled, owned story of value, right? That's a simple definition. More to come on that in a bit, but that's really what I would say it really is, the distilled, owned story of your value. And this can take the shape and the form of a value proposition, right? You have that one or two sentences where you say, this is what I do. That's really kind of how I see the brand piece of it. And identity is actually, I look at that as being a mindset. Because at the end of the day, when you've gone through your career from the time that you were professionally, in your 20s to the 30s to 40s, you've evolved your professional identity, right? The I am belief, if you will, that you had about yourself professionally has evolved with that. And that's how I see these pieces coming together. So branding, brand, and identity. And we're going to focus on our time here on this piece of brand and unpack that further. So it's a bit clearer about how that shows up for all of you. So before we get into the framework that I want to show you, I want to talk about the importance of brand. Why does it matter? Like, who cares? Like, okay, you have this brand thing, so what? Well, the importance of brand is, at the end of the day, brand's a consciousness game. So what do I mean by that? It's really about seeing that which you do. A lot of folks I work with have imposter syndrome. Yes, even senior leaders have imposter syndrome because they don't really see themselves in the way that they really truly are and the gifts that they bring. I work with one executive who, by all outward definitions, he had everything he needed. He was, a team of 1,000 people, all this kind of, deal, really well respected, was on podcasts, all this kind of jazz. But there's a certain segment that he actually felt of his audience that he felt he really wasn't as good as they were. And when he saw what he did, when he saw his magic and he became conscious of it, it shifted. And he became, he just realized it and he goes, I see it now. And that was the shift for him that helped him to make that transition. So it's really about becoming conscious of what we already do day to day with our clients, with people that we want to talk to, all of that. And it's really to the end of building a clear and aligned story, right? The story that you have that's here. Because to do branding and get the story out there, you have to know what the story is here, right? That's kind of where I see these pieces coming together. And it also helps you provide differentiation. If you're going to have a brand, you got to also be able to know, hey, well, what makes me different? And we'll cover that as well as we go forward today. And finally, it builds trusted prospects, right? We all want to close sales and have business. Great. This is an easy way to do that because the more you know your brand, the more that people are going to say, oh, I like what they're saying. Yeah, I resonate with that. Yeah. And they believe you because you believe you, right? They believe you because you believe you. Key piece there. So let's talk about the framework I have for you, which is, it's the Clarity Brand Pyramid. And it's really about, it's a very simple framework, and we're going to unpack it a bit for each of the areas as to kind of go a bit deeper into each. So at the very top of the pyramid is value, right? Second is differentiation. And the third piece of it is proof. So let's do our dip into each of these. So value is really the what. What do you do? What is the thing that you actually are doing? Now, I should point out, by the way, too, that value is really speaking to the single top result that you drive. And the key thing here is that your client or your target audience, they have a top pain. And the single top result you drive is the match to that pain, right? Those two are equal. So they have a pain, you've got a solution, and it's a top pain. You can solve other things, but of course, in our coaching business, we want to solve the top pain that actually matters most. And it's also a promise of delivery, right? This is, value is kind of this promise. So you look at with people that are hired, or look at sports stars, they're paid or hired based upon the fact that they can deliver some future value that they're going to bring to the organization or to the team or whatever the case is. So it's a future delivery of value. And that's what the promise is that you're making when you work with your clients. So next is differentiation. Differentiation is going to be the how. And the thing with the how is that there's always a lot of how, lots of how. So the question is like, how to begin to think about the different layers that are contained within differentiation, because you have to kind of think of how do you stack rank these in a way which prioritizes the most important stuff first and helps to illuminate what's important to your clients as well. And the other thing is that there's a hierarchy, right? Not all these perceptions or all these layers, if you will, are equal. So the question is, how do you put them in the right order to best tell your own story, which is your brand? Okay. So the last one's proof. Proof is, as it sounds, it is the where and the when, right? Where did you do it, or when did you do it, right? Past examples, right, or evidence of delivered or realized value. And this can take the form of like certifications, training, testimonials, case studies, whatever the case is for our clients. They're going to say, how do I know that you can do this? Well, here's some evidence that I'll share with you that you can feel good about working with me or buying from me, right? Within the, toward the given outcome that you're promising them in your coaching business. So now that we've gone through this framework of value, differentiation, and proof, I want to give you a fulsome definition of how I see professional brand, right? Which is your brand is the conscious realization of your unique distilled story, detailing your strategic value, differentiated approach, and validated by past aligned proof. And this, in my experience, captures all of the pieces in a way which helps to organize the story. Because again, at the end of the day, a brand is, your brand is your story. And so these pieces form the core elements that make up that story. So I want to go back to differentiation because, when I think about what can I help all of you with, in terms of your own businesses and everything else, this is an area that I've seen folks have some trouble with when it comes to their coaching businesses. I was just in Austin recently for the Virtual Coach Accelerator, which I'm a part of. And I saw this as well in different folks that are there, that they're trying to get a handle on this differentiation piece when it comes to coaching. And I wanted to share this and see if it would resonate with some of you. So differentiation is made up of different layers, as I mentioned. And there's different things here that are part of that. And if we go through this list, you're going to see that there's a lot of different potential ideas of what this can look like. So I want to just ask and see, which one of these would you say is a top thing? You can put in the chat, or you can just speak it out if you have any ideas around that. Anything come up for anybody? Terry said approach. DJ said values. Morris raised his hand. Morris, what do you got?
Yeah, I would say maybe it's a trick question, I'm not sure, but circling back to what you said earlier about consciousness, maybe the best differentiators are the ones that are our strengths, right? Like being conscious of which types of differentiators we are best at and bringing those in.
Okay, strengths. Okay, bring that. Tony says personality. Marlon says all of them. All right, there you go. I'm gonna make a choice. I'm gonna have all of them. D, all of the above. So here's what I've an identity from Liliana. So here's the one that I've seen that actually has the most resonance when it comes to our businesses. It's going to be approach. That tends to be the most important thing, right? If you have someone that you want to do something in your home, even if they're going to put on a new roof, for example, or they want to do something in there, you want to know what their approach is, right? Are they going to give you, what's their approach to doing it? Are they competent enough to do what has to be done? That's what I've found to be the one that's most important. Now, everything here on this list is on the map, and it has relevance, and it does fit into what makes sense. Obviously, if you have a awful personality, you're not going to be, you won't be easy to work with, right? If you're dressed poorly, it's not going to make a lot of sense because they're going to think that you can't do what you do. So obviously, they all have a place. But what I've found in my research is that the approach piece really is the key critical point. Because if you understand what your approach is, then everything else can flow from there. So let me dive deeper into that for a minute, because your approach effectively is your recipe. You're promising, as coaches, we're all promising some transformation to some outcome. We're saying, hey, you're here, and we're going to get you to here, some outcome that is wanted. And the client's question is going to be, okay, sounds good. How are you going to get me there? How do we do this? And you have to say, well, we're going to do this, this, and this to get you to this new shift. Everything else plays a supporting role for sure, no question about it. But that's what has to be articulated, because also your approach is also your magic. That's the gift that actually is so resonant. And of course, the hard part with our gifts sometimes is that we're like fish swimming in the water that can't see the water. Like we can't see our gifts as easily as other people can see our gifts, because they see it and they have a level of objectivity. They can see it through a different lens. So I'm going to share with you what I see as being on the approach piece, what comes up. So there's 3 steps I find to deliver on our value that I find. And I'm going to give you the steps and some of the language that can be attached to it, right? So step 1 typically is some sort of strategy, some sort of assessment or a plan that's put together, right? Step 2 is going to be some execution, some implementation, some development process. And step 3 is going to be some sort of scale or reassessment or acceleration. And I find this with all my clients, right? That this is what we go through. And even from a coaching perspective, it's funny because I remember at one time I had 4 VPs of engineering I was working with. And I thought, there is no way that this is when I was beginning for my process. I was like, they're all going to be the same. How can they be different? Turns out I was way wrong. They were wildly different in different areas. Now, they had similar things here and there, but they had all unique footprints about how they approached what they were doing. And that was like an aha moment for me, because I realized, like, holy cow, they're all unique and different. I wouldn't have thought that. But sure enough, they were very, very distinct. Right. So let's kind of take this and do a bit further on this one, because the other piece is that for each step, here's another thing. It's important, I find, to detail the how of each step. So for step one, you put down the 3 steps in step 1. For step 2, you have 3 steps as well. And for step 3, there's 3 steps. Why is this important? Well, it forces you to have to delineate your actual process, and it forces you to rank things about what's most important. If a client's asking you, or a prospect's asking you a question, and they go, hey, well, tell me about this. Well, how does that work? You want to be able to say this and this and this, and do that inquiry so you're clear, and more importantly, that they're clear, and they go, got it. I have confidence in working with you as the coach, and therefore that's part of the process. So let's put this in some action and see how this looks. So the 3 steps. So here's a step 1, 2, and 3, right? And the model I gave you right there above. And then if you're doing a cake, for example, right, here's 3 things that you can put together. Gather ingredients, mix together, bake the cake. You can put your own words in there. You can do it however you see it. You might see it a bit differently than I do. Great, because that's your way of seeing the world. Perfect. So for me, my steps are clarity, positioning, and alignment. Those are my 3 steps, right? Our good friend Morris, Bill Morris, his is create, grow, profit. It's in his name. It's in his domain name, right? He has his approach right there. But if I go to work with Morris, I know, hey, I'm going to get this approach. And I'm sure he can tell you exactly how that approach works, so you can lay out each of the pieces and be very clear about it. Same thing with me. Okay. So, and then you can add in the how for each step, right? To kind of go a bit deeper and say, all right, so now I got this, my step here, here's the model that we laid out. And then you can say, okay, here's the cake example. And you can go through and say, here's my top 3 things about if I were to bake a cake, here's what I got to do. You might have your own top 3 things for each one, right? The whole point is not that, you see the same thing I do, but more that you have a certain approach about how you see whatever it is. But for your business, this is an opportunity to kind of really clarify and distill out exactly what those pieces are, right? What are the things that you actually do to help the client move from where they want to be to where they have to go to, right? And for me, again, clarity, positioning, alignment, and here are my 3 areas, right? Values, next role dimensions, trajectory, value, differentiation, and proof, and integration, ownership, and transformation. And I can tell you about each of those and what they mean and explain them very precisely, because I've done that work to kind of clarify that. Does this resonate with you guys? Is this helping you out? Okay.
Very much so, Chris.
Okay, so let's talk about applying your brand, just to kind of wrap things up here. So this can help all of us as coaches in a couple of ways, right? Because once you do this work and have the clarity of your value, your differentiation, and your proof, the application of this is going to be on the website, right? You can lay things out and give people that process or the approach you have, how you do it. They're going to want to see that, as well as the value and proof as well. But your email marketing, right? And writing emails, you can write an email about part of your approach, or have a lead magnet about part of your approach, or all of your approach, or whatever the case is. Same thing with social media posts. All right, you can do that, talk about aspects of your particular approach. And your elevator pitch. Sales meetings, right? Every client or prospect wants to hear, like, well, how are you going to get me to where I want to go? They want to hear your approach. And then also networking, right? So these have a lot of applicability in terms of helping you to clarify these pieces and to get that going. That's why this idea of value, differentiation, and proof, and specifically differentiation, because that can be it can be very complicated, or it can feel that way because there's all these things, like which one do I pick? Like, even if you look at the answers you guys gave, a bunch of different answers, and they're all right within the overall lens. But the question is like, how do you rank them in a way where your clients are going to go and say, you know what, I want to talk to and work with DG. I want to work with Terry. I want to work with, Tony. That's the question we have to answer for ourselves. And for me, it's an ongoing inquiry. I don't sit there and say, I'm done with this. I've done it, but I have to keep doing it because I got to figure it out, right? To keep iterating and get it clearer and clearer and clearer, so that these dialogues I have with my prospects actually are converting, right? That's part of it, not the only thing, but part of it for sure. So I want to just, I've gotten a lot of things from all of you in this group, and I'm really grateful for the things you've shared and everything that you've given me, whether you knew it or not. And I want to be able to offer something to you guys as well. So what I've done is I've put together a worksheet to help you figure out your approach. So if you're interested in that, or if you have any other brand question that you want to ask me, we can do it obviously here in the session today, or if you want to ask it offline, happy to do that. If that interests you, just drop me a line, Chris@claritysiliconvalley.com, and I'm happy to send it to you. And just want to thank you guys for all that you've given me, and offer that back to all of you. So with that, I'll wrap up and thank you guys for your time.
Questions? You know what? When I listen to this, Chris, I think the biggest factor that I run into with people is the word confidence. And as you bring clarity, you bring confidence. And 99% of success is mindset. And I think where we struggle sometimes with mindset is because we lack confidence. Would you say that getting this dialed in like this leads to that, which then is kind of that ripple effect out to success?
Absolutely. I mean, when people, for myself, I'll speak for myself, when I've seen it for myself and getting clarity on this, as I've gone through different iterations of it, it's made a big difference. And also for my clients. I'll tell you something about when I work with my clients, I invite them to move from a thought of what they do and the professional beingness of who they are. And it's a shift, because if you just think I do these things versus you do it, it's a very different experience. And when people see that and experience it, most importantly, it's a transformational shift, because they've done the inquiry, they've done the homework, if you will.
The other
and they're more confident.
Yeah, and the other fine line that I saw in there was where you talk about aligned with story, which to me basically spells out authenticity. And I think sometimes where people struggle when they're presenting their options to work with them is they will feel a little bit afraid of that sales process, right? Like, this isn't, if it's not quite me, I don't feel like I can sell it. We always say, if I believe it, I can sell it.
Right.
And so part of the factor is, if your value, your story of value is not aligned with your consciousness of your magic, if that's not all in tune, that's probably where that resistance is coming from. Correct?
Yeah. Because when you have that realization, you're coming, to Donald's point, you're coming into alignment, in my experience, because you've actually checked and you know precisely what you do, and you can detail it out. And more importantly, and I mentioned this earlier, but I want to go back to it real quick, which is, I mentioned that, that a brand is a distilled, owned story of value. And, that ownership model is really key, because if you don't own it, then the alignment piece doesn't follow.
And there's something in back of that. When I train groups, oftentimes I always talk about the energy part of it here. And there's what we don't say. Okay. And everybody's like, well, what are the magic words, or what's the magic formula? There's no magic words or magic formula if your energy isn't right. And if you're not in alignment with all of this, your marketplace, whether you say it, whether you ever speak a word, is going to feel it. And when you do have this in alignment, you can walk into a room and not speak a word, and people will walk up to you. Does that make sense? You feel it, right? Chris, have you experienced that with yourself or with clients you work with, where they find
Absolutely.
like, oh my gosh, everything, like people are coming out of the woodwork to talk to me, right?
Yeah. There's an integration that's happened, right? That happens here, it's not here, but it's actually in like your and around beingness, where it's like that resonance and radiance shows up.
And this is important, when you talk about brand too, if you have that, you can't get commoditized in the marketplace, because there is that difference. Nobody can duplicate your unique footprint. Sometimes we worry, like, sometimes people think life coaches are a dime a dozen, right? Well, yeah, but no.
Mhm.
correct? And so each of us in our modalities will think, well, why would they work with me as opposed to somebody else that maybe they got more certificates on the wall or more gray hairs? I mean, could you have more gray hair than I have? I mean, it's like, it's just yeah, David, yeah, right, because you're growing them off the side of your face. That's the only way that's the only thing you've got on me, right? um but it is that. I'm just curious, does everybody have any questions about absolutely applying this to what you're doing? Marisol, I know you've touched down with Chris as well. Any insights, any thoughts here? I want to make sure that we don't bypass this. We know precisely what Chris has just said and know what to do here.
Yes, it gave me clarity because I was tied up with my approach and the way I would do things and details and details and details. And having this interview with him gave me the clarity to basically accommodate ideas, concepts into these three main areas, the pyramid. And it made a change in the way I would talk about what I do, which per se is difficult to explain people about epigenetics. But when I talk about the approach and what makes me different from other coaches, it helped me to have clarity around that. So now I don't have that little voice saying, oh, you're just another coach. No, it gave me more self-confidence because now I know that my approach is unique. And that gives me the moral authority to say, this is different. You want to know why I'm different? It gave me confidence.
Yeah. And I love, Chris, your example of the baking example. Every Saturday morning I bake pancakes now with my granddaughter, right? She's a little over a year old. And it's good. As she grows up, I mean, this is going to be the thing. It's going to be grandpa's recipe, right? I'm taking out the Betty Crocker cookbook, right? It's just FYI. But but you see, there's an example right there. We could say, well, they're no different than anybody else's pancakes. Yes, they are, because it's grandpa's pancakes, right? And yeah, it's how I lay everything out on the counter and how her and I experience that, right? And because here's the proof, right? I'm anal about making sure before I start I've got all the ingredients, and the day before, because I like making buttermilk pancakes. I mean, do I actually have buttermilk, or do I have just regular whole milk that I got to put a little lemon juice in to sour it so it acts like buttermilk? There's all those subtle little things in there. So if you're struggling like with your business or your coaching, I mean, think of that example he just used right there, right? And within your business, when you work with a client, do you gather the ingredients? Do you take an inventory? Do you have an initial assessment or a intensive that you do with them, right? What is that you do? How do you do that process to get to that end result, which is overcoming their top pain, right? So you can.
I'll go ahead.
Well, I mean, there again, you can play from both ends, right? So sometimes you can build it from this end or build it backwards from that end. Wouldn't you say, Chris? And so sometimes, or build it from the middle outwards. Don't.
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say was that I think that the one thing people, I think, sometimes mistake when it comes to brand is they think, oh, I have to have some key differentiator or something that's very specific and unique. And even with the approach piece, your approach will be the same as somebody else, if you will. But it's the totality of everything put together: your value, differentiation, and your approach, and your proof. And even within differentiation, all the different things in there, like your personality, your style. I mean, there's a bunch of things. The totality of that, when you add it together and put it in story form, if you will, that becomes what makes you different. Because no one, as Don rightly said, no one has your unique footprint. Yeah. Nobody.
Richard, and then probably David. I didn't see you raise your hand first, but Richard, I know you're going to have a very good insight here.
Well, thank you. We've all been taught in coaching through Evan's program and so on, avatar, and trying to understand your avatar, your target market. And that has turned out to be quite difficult for me. So the question has to do with, I'm real clear. If I wanted to go through your process, I'd be real clear on where I'd land all those things. But I'm not clear on the idea that those land with a potential avatar or client. That alignment. I'll tell you what my thing is. I've been an architect 45 years, and I'm moving into executive coaching. So building that bridge and making an explanation that creates that bridge has been a challenge. And of course, I need to understand exactly. I've been using AI to try to get at it, but I got to align my methods with their needs.
So your question is what, Richard?
How do you, instead of self-examination in your process, how do you align the construction of your brand with the needs and the pain of the target client?
So a couple things. So one of which I think is you have to be clear on who the audience is. That's the first thing. And then what is the primary pain that they're suffering from? I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of I didn't get into that a whole lot. I mentioned it briefly on the value section, but that's one of the key pieces, because from there, and then once you know what that is, and then you can kind of go, okay, well, I do. And the one thing with value, which is fascinating, and the pain part, is it's basically one coin, two sides. On one side of the coin is the client's top pain. Like, what are they wrestling with? That's like their biggest strategic pain. And then on the other side is the exact opposite, which is your solution, which is going to solve that. And getting clear on that can really be important, because at that point in time, then you can kind of go, okay, now once you know what you're solving for on the value side, then on differentiation, you can go down and say, okay, now what's my approach to solving that? Like, how am I going to help them with this shift that they have to go through from state A to state B over here? So that's how I would answer that question.
So it implies to me I'm focusing less time on who I am and where I came from, and more time on the process and the machinery that I use to get it done.
Yeah, and I would say too that your background as an architect, I don't doubt that actually factors right into with the coaching that you're going to do, because we're all products of our past and what we've been through. So that has a role, but there has to be a discovery process about what the actual steps that you're going to do to solve some pain that your client or target market has.
Okay, so that's the bridge that I'm searching for.
Mm-hmm. Could be. Yeah.
Can I help you out, Richard?
Yeah. We get more work on that side of the equation needs to be done.
Yeah. David.
Chris, I had a kind of epiphany. I've been working with Donald, and I used to work for Saudi Aramco, which is the largest corporation in the world, worth north of $2 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
And they would go out and hire a bunch of big firms to come in and do consulting for them. And they realized they weren't getting much out of it, so they asked us to go in and take a look at what they were doing. We went to one division. They paid $4.5 million for a consult. They couldn't even find a copy of the report 4 years later, okay? So virtually, they got nothing out of it. And working with Donald, I've understood now the difference between coaching and consulting, because Donald will tell my hard head one thing, and I'm thinking something completely different, and that's how I'm applying it. And that's what you get in consulting, is they're bringing stuff to you, and you're trying to come up with how to apply it to your own bit. So, like, to use your cake example, would be like you've had combine the ingredients. You say, well, you didn't get everything really combined the way that it should be. Or when I do a tax consult, I can tell you deduct these 5 items, but if I coach you, I can show you how to get the items onto your tax return and stuff. And so I'm trying to understand what you're doing, Chris. What's the best way when I'm approaching a client to talk to them more about that we're going to be there for a lot of hand holding, and not so much we're going to hand you a product and then try to get as far away from you as we can?
So the question I'm trying to understand here, David, is what's the difference between consulting or how coaching? I mean, I'm not getting the question. Can you just repeat that, please?
Okay. My question was probably inartfully worded. Was how do we communicate to the client that we're going to be there with them, that we're going to be there? We're not going to give them a consult and just leave. We're not going to give them like the items you had on your list, but we're going to be there with them to help them make sure that they're conducting those in a way that's appropriate and will bring them results.
Well, I think it's part of, I mean, that's kind of getting into more, like, to me, at least, a part of the package and how you structure it and kind of what you guide them in terms of the next steps from the discovery call that you have with them on the sales side, right? You're going to say, hey, here's how this is going to work. I'm here through this process, and I'll be here in this way. And you can define the parameters of how you want to engage with your clients in that time.
Okay, I appreciate that.
And I think
Yeah.
part of the value for I know for myself, David, that this has been a major transformation for me, because I used to go in and do stuff, right? And then go back 6 months later, nothing was done. Right? You check back in, well, how's it going? And that was like the biggest aha. Or somebody would go through a workshop with me, and pay us considerable amount of money, and then you check in a week later, a month later, a year later, and nothing has happened. So I think that comes down to what Chris talked about, proof. You know what I mean? I think it behooves us, anybody in business, it doesn't make any difference whether you're a coach or you're selling HVAC services, is check back in. Is that really working? Right? If they put a roof on your house, is it really keeping the rain out? And if it's not, why not? Right? If you are helping somebody change their eating habits, right? Is that actually happening? And just that one more step in the marketplace can be massive. Tony, I think you just put down there in the chat, a consult is a combination of, what would you say? I don't want to do it wrong here.
Oh, there it is. An old joke I heard. Consult is made up from two words, con and insult.
Well, and the other one is expert, an
Yes.
expert. Everybody know X is somebody that has been. PERT is a drip under pressure. And so basically an expert is a big drip. Right? Have you guys heard that one? So that's where, stepping back, where Chris is talking about brand value, the value, the differentiation, and the proof, when you can identify the marketplace's top pain point and not only bring them into your process, but make sure that process works, taking that time to carry through. That's the goal, because that's where you get your case studies. That's where you get your referrals. Most businesses fail not because they don't generate lead on the front end, is that they fail to generate in referrals. The biggest powerful source of profit. Hey, listen to this. Profit. What's that? What's profit? That's actual money in your pocket. Comes from referrals. Right? Create, profit, grow, right? It was a grow, profit, create. I always get it wrong. It's create, grow, profit, right? And it's like, it's right in the words of your business there, right? It's profit. And so what is profit? Okay. Profit can be, they finally lose the belly fat, right? Profit can be that they actually get to where they're going with something, so that's where it's at. Any other questions for Chris? Chris, this was very helpful. Very, very helpful. Morris, don't be so polite. Just, we're all friends here. You guys raising your hand. On these big webinars, I do this. Let's come on. We all know each other here.
Yeah, Chris, thank you so much for this presentation. Also, thanks for helping me one-on-one. We got to reconnect soon. So the question that I have is, when you talk about your approach, and of course it depends on the conversation, but I'm referring to like these get to know each other conversations. How much time do you give yourself to describe the approach?
When I do if it's a networking discussion, it depends upon the context. If it comes up, I can, go down the path and do it. Sometimes it doesn't come up as much. It's more about kind of the general stuff, and depends upon the direction that we're going. But if it's someone who's interested in this work, or there's a possible partnership, or there's areas of collaboration, then the approach can be very helpful to say, hey, let me just walk you through what I do and share with you a bit more detail about this. So it really is contextual in my experience.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Any last comments, questions?
One thing I'll just share is just to kind of add a couple of things. One is that someone asked me recently, they go, well, I tailor my approach to my clients. Like every client I have, I tailor it to them. And my response to that is, I do that too, but I have an approach I follow. So just to distinguish between the fact of that you have an overall approach that you follow step 1, 2, and 3. And then within that, of course, you're going to tailor it to every client's particular needs. And you're going to be attentive to what shows up within the field of the engagement. But I always follow my approach.
Yeah, that's clear. Okay. I know David's gonna, I hope your comment, David, but it's like David's been haranguing me for a script forever. And he finally realized, yes, I'm following a script, but I've thrown the script out. In other words, that yes, there's a process we're following, but it's just that. And so it's not one or the other, right? You've got to have that over general arching process in play. Chris, thanks you so much. This will be one that we can go back and watch and unpack, and I'll try to get it posted as quickly as I can here today, because I'm anxious to watch this again as well, Chris. And we might ask you to come back and go deeper with this on some in the future here. So
sure. And again, if folks want the worksheet or if any questions on brand, just drop me a note, Chris at claritysiliconvalley.com.
Thank you. Everyone have a good day.
All right. Cheers, guys.